This one's better
Hello and welcome. Hi, everyone. Good to see you. Welcome, welcome.
than hello.
I'm
Hello.
I'm so happy to be joined today by Jason and Andy and Jennifer. Welcome and to all of you who are joining, and thank you for attending the innovative Approaches to Foreign Language Instruction with Boom Cards panel. So my name is Kari Lisa Johnson, and I'm the marketing director for Boom Cards, and we're very excited to be partnering with Andy and Jason Hobbs from French with the Hobbs and Jennifer Saunders of AJ's Language Store today. So thank you, Andy, Jason, and Jennifer. We'd love to get to know the attendees, so please share where you're watching from and the subject you teach in the chat. And we'd also like to let you know that we are recording this panel and live streaming it, so you'll be able to find the recording on our YouTube channel. We'll also send a follow-up recording to your email tomorrow if you registered. So we have a Q&A box. You'll see that below on the Zoom panel. That's a great place to post your questions so that everyone can see the question and also the answer to it. And then at the end of the panel, we'll have time for a live Q&A. So make sure to stay until the very end for that. You can ask your questions in the Q&A box, and these educators will answer it live. And to kick things off, can we have you guys just tell us a little bit about yourself and how you started teaching and making boom cards?
Sure, you guys want to go first?
Sure, we can start. So we are Jason and Andy Hobbs. We're a husband and wife team. We're both French teachers, and we both got started teaching, and I guess on our own roads. But then as teachers, we were studying to obtain our master's degrees, and each of our programs took us to France, and that is where we met. And it came back to the US and settled here and are both respective teachers. I'm at the university level, and Jason is at the high school level. And we started making boom cards really heavily during COVID. We had just a really strong need, as we know, distance learning to a way to keep students engaged. And so that is when we really started with Boom.
And I have to give a shout out. If you want to see cute pictures of Jason and Andy in France, you can take a look at blog.boomlearning.com and see their love story unfold in pictures. So Jennifer, do you want to share a little bit about your background?
Sure. I attended the University of Delaware with an ESL minor. I have been teaching for over 30 years, and most of those years have been with English language learners. Now, throughout the time that I was teaching, I also tutored students after school in English and Spanish. I gained my Spanish from a non-authentic background. I've had some experience at the university level just taking Spanish classes, but I also would go to the professors after the lecture and say, no, wait, really, teach me the language. So I really have always enjoyed Spanish very much. So that is what I teach as a foreign language. What I do is I apply what I teach as an English language teacher to anything that I do teaching and tutoring in Spanish in the basic level. So, yeah.
Well, great. Just to ground the conversation, I'd love to let you guys know we have people commenting in the chat where they're from. We have an SLP from Pennsylvania. We have, let's see, people from all over. I saw Saskatchewan, Mexico, a French and English ESL teacher. Ohio is represented. So we have a lot of different people from different places who are all tuned in to hear a little bit more about your experience with innovative approaches to foreign language. And so starting off, maybe we can ask Jennifer, how do boom cards help you teach foreign language to your students?
Oh, goodness gracious. You know, when I was young, I would ask my grandmother, how did you make that spaghetti, Grandma? And she would say, oh, I just kind of put it together and put it in the oven. And I would always think, well, that's not enough. And that's how I feel about boom cards, talking about how I do that. I do so many different things, and I absolutely enjoy doing it, and explaining it is a little harder than enjoying it, if you know what I'm talking about. Okay, so how do I use them when teaching? The first thing I do is I find out what the student knows, what the student doesn't know. Um, if the student has, I have one student who, before taking Spanish with me, knew the numbers 1 to 10. And when I found that out, the 1 to 10 in Spanish, when I found that out, I could take that into a deck that included 1 to 10, but then also pushed the student to up to 20, and also provided reading those numbers as they are spelled. So taking what the student knows and adding on to what they know is really important. Now, so what I do in creating boom cards is that I take the approach most of the time as using them as teaching. Now, I might use someone else's cards to sort of launch an experience of, like, immerse them in vocabulary. But what I do to when I use my own is actually use them using flow magic or using them in order, to actually use the first set of slides to teach, the second set of, in context, the second set of slides to provide practice, listening and pronouncing words they just heard. The third set of slides is to practice what they just heard in context and out of context. I absolutely love this, you can tell. Okay, and then the fourth part that I do is actually do some quizzing and assessing in and out of context. You cannot skip the play part of it. So you stick in a couple of slides with play, sorry, cards, not slides, with playing on them, and then you give them a reward at the end, like video of a dancing duo, like, yeah, you did it. So I absolutely love it.
I have another follow-up question. When you teach the first time, like in those first 2 sessions that you mentioned, do you use an interactive smartboard, or how do you physically show it to the students?
Well, I would use, when I physically show it to the students, it's using pictures that I might not find on Boom, but the scenario is the same. So, for example, teaching words in the bathroom is one of the decks I picked that I like the most, to show you later. And that is, so in the classroom, I created the experience of the bathroom with some realia, some things around the room that are from the bathroom, excluding the toilet and the sink.
So you turn your classroom into an immersive bathroom experience.
a little bit, just some
bit.
props, not. And so anyway, then introducing vocab there, with cards and visuals and things like that. And then a couple of conversational things. But then I would really use the Boom deck that I created to really nail down the vocabulary and provide the practice. Then after the whole entire Boom deck, go back into the classroom, in the physical environment, and do either more and different conversational things with those items, or just practice what was in the Boom deck with those items. It depends on the level of my students.
And did you want to try sharing that deck?
Sure. Now, how many cards would you like to see?
Well, I'm just, I think people will be excited to just see how, after you've turned your classroom into this experience, how you can translate that to the screen. Because I think you've done a great job using flow magic, and it's almost like an escape room in that you've turned the Boom cards into an actual kind of like dollhouse almost.
Like, yeah, an experience for sure. Okay, let's see. Go ahead and share. Okay, can you see my cards?
Yes.
Okay, great. So here is the menu. This isn't the very first slide. There was an intro slide saying, welcome to the bathroom. This is the menu slide, which is the second one. And so you can go, the students can pick which objects they'd like to learn, or the teacher can choose which objects to teach that day. The format is the same for each of the three sections of the bathroom. Now, students love, depending on the students, one student will cry out, you know, I want to do the soap one. Let's do the plunger. It depends on the personality of the crowd that you're with. And if nothing else, you just pick. And so here's a preview of the words in English. This is actually a deck that teaches English. Or no, teaches Spanish, sorry. I actually did this both in English and Spanish. Two different.
So you have it both ways. You have it for English learners.
Yeah. Yeah, I do. And then I forget which one I'm looking at. I have to check. So yeah, here's the explore.
Haz clic en cada objeto para escucharlo y leerlo en inglés.
So I am teaching students whose first language is Spanish, and they are told to click on the objects.
Shelf,
Here's a video of a student using
mirror,
a mirror.
Oh, nice.
And he keeps combing his hair as we go through the bathroom.
towel,
So you can put in sound effects.
shower head,
Now, you're not actually making the curtain disappear. When you click, you're actually taking away a layer of a copy of a curtain. So you can use the feature to take away the curtain as opposed to make the words appear. There's a little trick to that.
curtain,
I'm afraid to share that there's a toilet flush as well. Some of you will appreciate that. Maybe some of you won't. All right, so
It's the type of thing that might keep students more engaged. So whatever is
Right.
going to keep them excited about learning English words or learning Spanish words or learning French words is really what it's all about. So
Yeah.
now if you can all
lo hacemos otra
I'm
vez.
sorry, I'm sorry.
Haz clic en cada objeto para escucharlo y leerlo en inglés.
Okay, go
So
ahead, say that
we
again.
may come back to this, but I wanted to shift over to Andy and Jason
Yes,
for a moment
absolutely.
to see if they could answer the same question, which is
Sure.
how do boom cards help you teach foreign language to your students?
I think there's a lot of ability with boom cards that you can use them not just to kind of reinforce acquisition, but actually introduce as well. So, I mean, there's a great ability to do such a variety of things with it. So we've actually done, you know, to do an introduction to a new material to kind of explore, kind of see, can they pick things up just by seeing it? But also certainly, you know, practicing new material and then also doing some reading of cultural things with it as well. You want to pick up?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, boom cards are great because, as we all know, they are self-checking. We don't, as teachers, it takes out the element of grading and printing, and the students receive instant feedback. And so, because of that, we really want to take advantage, to really embrace boom cards in our classroom, but used in a variety of different ways. And so, yeah, we have found it really effective to, for example, before we start a lesson on definite articles, we have the students play a deck on definite articles to see what can they figure out before it's formally introduced to them. And they surprise themselves with what they can learn and what they can take away. And then when the formal lesson comes in, it's like it's clearer for them as they're learning. And then later on, we come back to that deck and they have gained a sense of confidence because they can truly see that they have grown in their learning with definite articles. So we just use boom cards in such a variety of ways, as whole class instruction, with culture, with reading, with listening. there's just so many different possibilities that we've tried incorporating, that students respond really well to, and what we have enjoyed teaching and implementing as well.
So what are some of the creative ways that you've incorporated those cultural elements into your instruction?
Well, I can screen share right now, and we have created some reading decks that focus on culture. So let's see if we can screen share here. That's family. Okay, so here is a deck we have with Mardi Gras. This is for our intermediate and advanced learners, but you can see here that the students are introduced. Here we want them to learn about a Francophone activity in the world, celebration. And so they are introduced to these two gentlemen, and the students are led through a reading where they read the gentleman just talking about the celebration and what happens. One of the guys is from New Orleans, and the other wants to learn more about it. And so the students will be taken through different questions, reading comprehension questions about that certain text. And here there's some multiple choice, and then with questions with images as well. And then they can always go back to the text as well as if they would like. And then the next section will be a different part of Mardi Gras, focusing on a different element of the celebration. And then again, we take them through different comprehension questions as well. So by the time that they're done, they've read a fairly long reading comprehension passage, but we broke it up into sections with different reading comprehension parts. And this is something that we do as a whole class even, or maybe with partner work, or taking it in just as an individual practice as well. So there's a lot of different ways that we would incorporate this, but this is something that we have found is helpful for culture and reading comprehension.
What I love about this also is that you guys are based in the US, right? So being based in the US, you're talking about French culture right here within the US, where you have a lot of expertise. So I think that could be really interesting even for people all over the world to learn more about French culture in the US in this way. And the great thing about our really diverse population of publishers is that you have French speakers from Canada, French speakers in the US, from France, from different parts of Africa or other former colonies. So you really have a breadth of different voices that you can hear with the audio supports and different speakers to give you a better ability to listen and understand.
That's true. There was a colleague or somebody that had used our decks, and the person responded and said that she wanted her students to hear different accents around the world, of different French speaking accents. And so that is true, because there's so many different accents all speaking though the same language and communicating together.
Yeah, and it definitely, I remember, especially when you're learning, not necessarily from a native speaker, it can, in your class, let's say at school, it can be incredibly valuable to get a range of different voices from different countries and to be able to understand everyone, no matter what their accent is. So that's really valuable. I wanted to ask all of you, whoever wants to answer this one first, how can boom cards be used to create interactive and engaging foreign language lessons? So what elements really add to the engagement and interactivity?
I'll go first if you want. So the interactivity is one of the advantages to boom cards, because as a creator or as a purchaser, you can find boom cards that engage the students in so many different ways. One is, again, through clicking on audio. And by the way, let me go back to what Andy said. I would love to do that. I'm going to do that in my classroom, getting different students the way they pronounce words and celebrating that more. Now I'm at the elementary level, but I just love that idea. I can't wait to use it. So back to the interactiveness. So I absolutely love that you can do click and drag, which is something that's that is the most popular movement that I've seen students want to do. They do like to click on answers and find that immediate feedback, but they love to manipulate things. So even the feature where you're typing in an answer, they love that because they're actually doing something to contribute to what's happening on the screen, just like with any game. And the interactivity with regard to video is that you can choose to play a video that shows you something, which can be a reward or a representative video of what you're studying. At the end of my St. Patrick's Day deck, I have actual dancers doing Irish dancing. And that was from a YouTube video or some other video that actually it was a Pixabay video, and I downloaded it, and then I put it up on Vimeo, which you have to do. And then I downloaded the URL, uploaded that into Boom, and it's an actual video, which I was surprised that I could do it. But I'm glad that students have a chance with Boom, whether I purchase one or create one, that the interactivity is always there. You're either deciding what to click, you're deciding with back and forward buttons to go back and see something that you've seen before, but you'd like to hear it again on the last slide. You can click to go through the menu and decide what parts of the presentation you want to see next. So.
And one other thing that we added recently, this was actually requested by speech language pathologists, but it's helpful for foreign language instruction as well. And that's the ability for students to record themselves saying something and then play it back. So that gives them a chance to really listen to their own pronunciation and make corrections themselves. So Jason and Andy, did you want to answer that question too, just about what elements your students find the most engaging or interactive?
Yeah, I mean, all that Jennifer said is so true. It's nice to have the different ways that they can interact, and that we can create different types of activities so that they can do the click and drag or the actual typing in or just clicking on something. But even the multimedia, having listening, they can write, they can read, and now they can speak. Do the recording. It's such there's just such a variety with it. I know I used that word already, but even just the fact that they can do it by themselves individually, they can do it in class, out of class, but also you can make it in the classroom interactive in that it can be whole class. You could do a deck together, at least parts of it, just to kind of reinforce things, or a partner could work on it as partners. So there's also the in-life, real life interaction as well that comes from using it, and not just them interacting with the screen. So I think that's nice to be able to do that as well.
Mm-hmm. I think the one word to answer this is variety. I think that when you have a deck of Boom cards that have a lot of variety, it keeps the students on their toes, and they aren't just expecting another multiple choice card, but they don't know what's coming next. So because of what the Boom cards can offer, there might be a question with images, but then the next question is with audio. And just because they don't know what's coming next, that helps keep the engagement high.
And we've heard it both ways, right? We've heard sometimes with special education or with younger students, it can be helpful to have the same format of the questions over and over again because they know what to expect. But then I'd imagine with older students or more advanced students, that variety really spices things up and keeps them engaged. Andy, do you use Boom cards with your university level students?
I do, in fact.
Really?
And they,
Okay.
yes, at first I wasn't sure. I try to, gauge what their reactions were, but they really truly enjoyed them. And they sometimes would ask for, do you have a Boom deck on this? And so I used it as homework. We used it in whole class with partners. I even used it as an assessment one time. I think though, the repetition, like you were saying, Carrie, is really important. And I think that even though you have repetition, for example, with ER verbs, if that is what your Boom deck is encompassing, and you have so much repetition with ER verb conjugations, but at the same time in that repetition, you have it just a little different between cards, and that helps with the students staying focused.
Yeah, I
And
think
that's something that we do automatically, in that that you can automatically have the questions scrambled so they're not always in the same position, or you can choose to hide the more advanced cards and start them off with like a set of 10 and then continue to get more advanced each time, or it could be more randomized. So we have all of those as choices, so the educator can kind of decide based on the individual class or the students and their preferences. But I didn't mean to cut you off. Jason, were you going to say something else?
Yes, I was going to say, it's to what Andy was saying, building both, having multiple questions of the same type, so they kind of get used to it. But then before it just becomes too much, adding, let's continue using this in a different way. So, and you can, like you said, you can make a whole deck that is very much like activity, so they really get that repetition and get confidence with it. Or you can do a lot of different things. And so again, it's nice to be able to choose how you do that.
And I'm going to shift over quickly to some interesting questions that are coming in. Ellen was asking, what about authentic texts on a boob card? And I think what she means there is maybe like historic texts or literature. Do you guys ever incorporate that? The thing that comes to mind for me is just making sure it's in the public domain, and that the reading, if you have a voice reading, is in the public domain as well. Because sometimes people don't always know if they're publishers to check both. You might have a text that's historic enough that it's in the public domain, but you have a reading by a modern actor that is not in the public domain. So that's one reason to be a little bit cautious before putting some of this historic literature, or maybe a piece of an important document. Before you put that in, just make sure that the voice recording is allowed for commercial use as well if you're a publisher. But did you guys have any comments on that? Is that something you've used in the past?
Any of our commercial decks are texts that we have personally written. But yes, I could see how if you wanted to create something for your classroom that you have a specific text. It is limited though with the amount of space you have and how comprehensible it is for students, just with the amount of space and how much text you have on one card. But it could work as any reading comprehension practice with we showed you earlier, with the reading on one card and then continuing on with questions afterward.
And one of the things that came up in another session that I was doing is that almost anything complex, so let's say you're doing the whole Declaration of Independence for English learners, can be broken down into smaller parts. So if you took it sentence by sentence and kind of worked on it that way, that would be a much more boom format friendly way to view it, as opposed to a big block of text, which would be pretty hard to see, especially if somebody is on their phone trying to do.
It's overwhelming to have such a long text. And, if you ask your students to memorize a poem in the target language, you take it part by part, not just the entire poem. And so breaking it up into pieces is definitely more effective and helpful.
I agree. I would just add one thing, and that is, after you've broken it down into parts, or even before you break it down into parts, maybe before and after, if they're given the whole picture, to say, look what you just did. You just did all of this. And now if we're in the classroom in person, or even virtually, you can take them into, okay, so what's the basic idea of the entire thing that we just took apart and studied? That can be an extension of the boom card, the boom deck. Yeah. I agree with everything you said, for sure.
Yeah. So we also got another question. Can you show us an example of how you would pre-teach a concept? And I think there we're getting into the idea of maybe formative assessments, because I think what you were saying before was that you might do a pre-test or a pre-evaluation to see how much the students know. Like, let's say you're teaching a Spanish 2 class. You might want to know how much did they really carry over after a whole summer from their Spanish 1 experience. Right. So you might do a pre-assessment or correct me if I'm wrong, does pre-teaching make sense to you as well using boom cards?
I would say you certainly can do kind of as a review. Like I like that idea of, coming back from summer break, and doing it that way. But with certain topics, especially some grammatical concepts that are very much, rules based, there's a logic to how it works. And so, especially once students have started to see that there are the rules and the logic to the language, that there's patterns. And so to help them to work on looking for those patterns, putting these things in front of them and saying, what can you figure out based on what you know and what you see and based on the feedback, because they do get to find out, well, that wasn't right, here's the right answer, why is that? And so kind of getting them to think about why might that be. And so it really would work for certain topics and certain ways that you design the Bloom cards. Do you have a deck handy that we could show that maybe?
I can
But
definitely.
mainly it's grammatical things that we've done it with, especially ones that, they can start picking out patterns.
And that's exactly what Ellen said. She was imagining that you might use it with definite articles.
Mhm. Yes, I can share in just a second. Maybe if Jennifer has an answer or something to add while I
Yeah.
pull up our definite articles.
Well, I also have another question while you're looking that up, but Jennifer, if you did have something to share, feel free.
Yeah, I just wanted to add that good teaching is good teaching. So if you're using the Boom deck as a preview or a post-assessment or something in between, if you're previewing, you're using authentic tries by students to sort of informally assess what they need anyway. If you're not presenting them the formal assessment, you really have to decide which assessment you're using. But if you're previewing in class physically, there are different ways to do that. You can have props, realia, just a presentation of some kind to lead you into the Boom deck, or use the Boom deck to lead you into a lesson.
All right, so we are going to show you object pronouns that we have done before. As Jason was saying, that is something that builds on each other with following patterns and following rules. And so, for example, if students were already familiar with pronouns, we're familiar with direct object pronouns, and now we're introducing indirect object pronouns. Well, they've already learned the pattern of direct object pronouns. So now can they figure out the patterns of indirect? And so this might be an example of something, and we might hide some of the cards. We might not show this entire deck because we don't want them to become overwhelmed. But maybe we will show them some cards where they can pick up, okay, we've already seen commands before. So now I'm seeing commands again, but now I'm seeing this word here instead of seeing the lay before. So can I still figure out what's happening? And then this one would be harder because it's a fill-in. So we might hide this. There's an audio here, and just based on what we're hearing, because a lot of times with foreign language, you just pick out pieces, and the pieces you pick out, can you put the puzzle together? And so with the handful of cards that we give them, can they figure it out? And then we come back as a class and we talk about it, or maybe they just talk with a partner. I really had no idea what I was doing, or hey, I got that one right? And so they start to discuss with their partners what patterns they're seeing and what they can share with each other, and go forward as of more formal instruction and whole class discussion of what they took away from now indirect object pronouns.
And I think another important point is that with Boom cards, you don't really have the ability to reinforce the wrong answer. Like if you imagine you were doing worksheets or something like that, you could really practice doing something the wrong way a lot of times before you get that feedback that actually this is the pattern. So do you find that gives your students a jump start?
I think so, yeah. And again, I think for me, it really helps them to develop, just the eye that looks for why is this way? Because the languages, even though there's a lot of irregularities to them, there is a general sense to how things are put together, that it's not just random things, but it is I think you can, again, seeing things in context and be able to, like you say, only advance when you get the right answer, even if you're not exactly sure. At least it starts coming together eventually.
Yeah, maybe it helps them build a foundation a little bit faster, and then they can work on all the irregularities after
Right.
that.
Now, just one thing on the elementary level, this is the chance to build that foundation for them and model out loud for them your internal dialogue. Okay, so using one boom deck that might not be the one you're going to use in class to sort of model for them. Okay, well, that slide I got right, that card I got right, but then this card, well, something's wrong, something's different. And sort of modeling for them how to decode what's encoded for them is important for later years too, but also really useful for the rest of your boom cards, as the boom decks, it can advance in difficulty. And then the randomness of them can present difficulty right in the middle of everything. So yeah, but good challenging difficulty, not over difficulty.
Right.
What is that called when it's just pushing to the edge of mastery? I guess that's just mastery-based learning. It's like pushing somebody where they're just to the edge of what they can do so that they are able to strengthen and build those skills. So I have a couple more follow-up questions from the audience, but I'll switch over to that. A question for Jennifer, because I mentioned that your decks looked a bit like escape rooms, or were put together a bit like escape rooms. Can you explain what an escape room is? If not, I'm happy to take that question, but
Actually,
it's a popular type of card, of boom cards. So I'm happy to take it if you can't, but you could tell us a little bit more about how you build your cards.
now, do you mean escape room in the real life where you go to with your friends on a Saturday night, or do you mean within a boom card?
Both, I guess. The question was asking what an escape room was. So to frame the conversation, right, you have real life adventures that people go on a Saturday night. They might go to an escape room, and you have to solve puzzles to get out of a situation. And then the boom cards that are made to mimic escape rooms. Do you want to take it away?
Yeah, sure.
Concept.
The student is clicking through everything they can on the screen, and this might also involve a little bit of modeling on your part as the instructor, to help them understand that that room is full of things for them. Now, one thing to help them understand that is at the top, a set of instructions in their first language, what you anticipate to be their first language. A second thing would be modeling through it, like, oh, there's a speaker. This is again for elementary. There's a speaker. Let me click on it and see what voice or sound I can get. And then, wow, is there another object I can choose to listen to and hear? And then once you leave that room, you have some sort of introduction to all of the vocabulary you're getting ready to explore in the rest of your deck. Does that answer the question a little bit?
I think that's a perfect answer. Yeah, that's wonderful. Thank you.
Okay.
Nancy asked the question, how long does it take on average to make a fairly normal high school boom deck? So I'm assuming that's going to probably go to Jason.
Yeah. Or
it varies.
Or Andy,
Yeah, it truly varies. It really depends how in depth we go, and how much the reading decks take a lot longer than putting together a vocabulary deck, I would say. We're also pretty meticulous, and so we like our decks done just right, and we have a goal in mind, and how are we meeting that goal so our students will meet that goal. I will say it's a little slower, at the beginning, but then once you start getting into your rhythm, then it picks up a little bit. So,
and I would say that you're also professional publishers. So if you're privately publishing for your own classroom, you might be able to get just as much traction without a lot of attractive graphics, but instead using like a picture of your class pet or something like that, you may
Right.
be able to drive the excitement and engagement without having professional level graphics.
Right. And also it's quicker if you already have one deck, you can just copy that deck and then modify. So if I'm starting from scratch and there's a learning curve, I mean, I don't want to scare people like maybe in 45 minutes to an hour, but then once you start getting faster, then and you're not worried about aesthetics, then it can go, 30 minutes. It really just depends on your style, but would that be fair? 30
Yeah.
to 60?
And again, and what elements you're putting into it.
Right.
Obviously, if you're going to add audio, you got to factor in the time to record audio. But again, it's also something that, the learning curve. But yeah, I think that's realistic.
And a reminder, you don't have to make everything from scratch. If
No.
Right.
if you know that you're teaching a certain lesson tomorrow, you can shop the store and Jennifer, do you want to explain how you would go about shopping the Boom store for a material if you wanted to purchase something?
Sure, I would definitely use the search for one thing, but then there's a certain amount of caution. You really want to preview what each deck that you either are going to purchase or use as a freebie, because you want it to have what you want it to have. Yeah, that's all I was thinking.
So to give a little bit more information, you mentioned freebies, and you can sort by price, so you could find the lowest cost items. But as you said, a lower cost item might not have as much depth of content, so it might only be 5 cards because it's a freebie, whereas there's another deck that has 50 cards that's going to really be more comprehensive, but it might cost more money.
Well, yeah, and sometimes you just want simple. Sometimes you want one of those that costs $1 and it sort of hits the mark for you getting ready for another deck or for your lesson or closing out a lesson. I want to build on what others were saying before about when you have a skill, and you master some of it, then adding on to that with new experiences that aren't as stable. So you've got that pattern that repeats, just what you were saying earlier. I just want to emphasize that it's really important to sort of bring them to that next level, but not in such a tense way. Just having mastered a certain pattern of question making. Then if you're getting a new boom deck to use as sort of a follow-up, that could present other patterns that are just foreign to you, but you've got a basis of vocabulary or skill to bring into that next strange boom deck.
And you
so
might
you can really have fun with that.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. Go
No,
on.
go ahead.
So what I was going to say is also that you could take a chance and find a more advanced deck and then go through and physically hide the cards. And you would do that just in the drop down where you would normally go to assign the deck. And we can also, I'm going to have one of our helpers add the link with instructions on how to hide cards, but you might hide a good number of cards in this more advanced deck and only show the student the immediate building blocks on the pattern that they already know. And then you might come back to that deck, a month later when they've learned that second pattern so that they can answer a whole nother set of questions within that same deck.
Carrie, that's a good, I want to add to what you're saying to, the learning curve of creating decks can be time consuming, but like I said, as you find your rhythm, you get quicker, but also to use the deck in multiple ways. So not to just use it one time, but that the students would see it again, maybe as a warm-up exercise, or maybe they see it as an exit ticket, or even a review before an assessment or something, so that it's not just one time and then it's done, but that the same deck can be used multiple times later in the school year even, or as review next year, so that it keeps reappearing for the students.
I agree.
Yeah, Patrice asked, as an SLP, I search for the goal I am addressing. I can also search by grade level and price. So that's a good point, that you could look for past tense, you could look for ID pictures or real pictures. That's sometimes what people search for, a particular main idea, answering a particular question type. So the more detail you can put into the search about what you're looking for, the easier it will be to find that precise set of boom cards. And then if you don't find it, you have a couple options. You can make your own, or you might even be able to give feedback to the author. I don't know if either of you guys have ever had that experience where somebody's giving you feedback and said something.
Yes.
I'd really love to see another deck on just like this one on this topic. Like, have you received that type of feedback before? And did you make it?
Yes,
Well, and
oh, go ahead, Jennifer.
well, and I was just going to be real for a moment and say I've actually received feedback on a couple of mistakes I've made in my text, and I've so appreciated that. And after my shock of, oh my gosh, I left mistakes, because I go over what I create over and over and over to make sure there are no mistakes. But when someone catches it, I get excited, like, oh, I'm going to fix that. Thank you. Thank you. So that's the feedback I've gotten. I haven't seen one that requests something different. So I look forward to that.
Yes, we had an AP French teacher reach out to us a couple times actually, and she said that, you know, I've liked your decks, but I really don't have time to create one right now. Would you create one for us? And so we have a couple different decks we have created for her or another teacher.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the great thing about the community, because it's not a big a big multinational publisher. You can reach out, and usually the creator would be really excited to have you on their mailing list, be able to talk to you in the future, be able to potentially ask you advice about something, and to make you something custom. Not always, they might not have time, but it's always worth asking. And I know that the publishers that I've talked to always really appreciate having those conversations with their buyers, and they can't reach out to you. So you have to, if you have somebody you love, please follow them, reach out to them. You can even follow them within the Boom platform. So we only have 3 minutes left, so I have to jump over to wrapping up. But before I do, I just want to thank Jason and Andy and Jennifer so much. They're going to get cut off at the very end of the presentation, so I have to make sure to say a very, very warm thank you right now. We really appreciate you guys being so willing to adjust on the fly and share your screens with us and answer these questions that everybody had. So thank you so much. And then let's see.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's really been an interesting conversation, and such a pleasure. And I do want to let everyone know that on the 8th and 9th, we are having a hashtag sale. So it's going to be dollar deals. So mark your calendars for the 8th and 9th of August. That's going to be an exciting time when you can get special deals on Boom cards. So tune in for that. And let's see, I also want to let you guys know that you're going to be receiving a recording. So you should have that in your follow-up email. A friendly reminder to please fill out the feedback form. You should see the feedback form right in the chat. The screen that I have put up now shows you how to get help if you need additional questions from the Boom team. And please join us for well, I guess this is the, I think this is the last session. So there's nothing else to join, but it's been a fantastic Boom Back to School Symposium. And we're so grateful for everyone who participated. So thanks again, and
Thank you.
Have a wonderful day.
Thanks.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.